There we go. Okay, the first thing we've sent out the minutes to the September 8th meeting, and I'll first accept them. Has everybody had a chance to read those? I'll accept the motion to approve if there's no changes. Second, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then we have the special meeting on September 20th. We had a chance to review that. If so, I'll accept the motion to approve.
I would comment that I'm listed as present and I wasn't, so I think that should be modified for the approval as modified.
Okay, so motion to approve as amended. Second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. Okay, now we've got we'll go with, which presentation do you want to go out of order on?
The one from Weston Sampson.
Oh, okay, all right, so we'll go right to, John, you want to introduce whatever?
Yep. Yeah, we've been, Weston Sampson's been working on basically getting all our water system plans in a GIS system. We're still utilizing the old plans too. The consultant, Sam Kenny, working for Weston Sampson, will kind of give you some more details on that. But this presentation is part of the public outreach that we're required to do for the grant that we received from Mass DEP for this. So, Sam, if you want to.
Thanks for inviting me to be here tonight. Try to give a real brief overview. Like John said, this kind of checks a box for public outreach and a little bit of explanation about what this was and how it was funded. Next slide, please. So really the process started about 2 years ago when we actually went and tried to procure a grant through the SRF program. And the primary goal was to begin to develop an electronic and, more importantly, interactive water distribution map. So we were successful in getting a grant, and the city was able to get basically a total project of about $160,000 worth of effort. But really that broke down, and about $100,000 of that came through the grant itself. About $30,000 was in-kind services, or basically the city continuing to do their own, record keeping and general efforts in concert with this, and then a fiscal contribution of about $30,000. So that's really the takeaways for a relatively low upfront cost. You're able to get a pretty substantial jump on this effort. Next slide, please. So it's important to take a step back and realize that the starting point here were from your existing records, which are incredibly detailed paper records. I mean, hands down, the best out there. No one has this level of detail. It's fantastic. So you got a snap out here actually of basically where Main Street comes together to Boulder Drive, just to the right of us here. But there's a ton of detail on these things, astronomical level of detail. Right now, the management of these sheets involves, anytime there's an issue or you want to check something, you basically have to manually locate the sheet that's in an actual drawer, pull it out, find it, and physically make those changes by hand, cross something out, write over it, anything like that. It's a system that works and obviously has worked for you guys, but there's a major limitation to them in that they're both fragile and immobile. You can't really just take a stack of these things out in the field, especially in the dark or, next to a water main break where it's gushing into the roadway. They're also highly susceptible to just passive damage. A coffee cup could completely ruin the functionality of, 100 years worth of record on this plan. So they have some limitations. Next slide, please. So primarily the goal of this was to focus on creating the backbone of a water GIS. So we developed a geo-index, located and oriented all 953 of those 40 scale sheets, and digitize them. That's a lot of fancy speak for we all copied them into this form. We rotated them so they matched up where the streets overline, and we traced your core features, water mains, valves, hydrants, and started linking some of the primary data to them. What diameter is a main, what year was it installed, anything like that. And that really formed the creation of your water GIS. Next slide, please. So what do you have now? Kind of a snapshot up there. Basically, you have all of your core water infrastructure in an electronic format, reference to its location as close as possible physically out there in the street. You see kind of both an aerial image and sort of a parcel overlay looking at it right now. And if you click on any one of those individual items, then you pull up the attributes and you get that next layer of detail. So you have basically your entire system in this format and starting to form the framework for which you can hang more stuff on. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? A lot of that kind of is up to you guys, but it falls into a few main buckets. There's some unfinished areas of the distribution system, mostly cross-country mains or things where it doesn't quite overlay on the street correctly. So a little bit more investigation, maybe get an actual GPS location on some of these things to fill in the gaps and just make sure it's as accurate as it can be. The city also has a record of basically every service in your system. You have tie cards for pretty much every property. You can put those in and physically link those to this as well. So if you tap on the parcel for 700 Main Street, the tie card itself would come up and you'd be able to see the service into this building, where it's located, what ties are to it, and get that information there. Kind of item number 3 is, like I mentioned, there's a ton of detail on those paper records. Everything from, a coupling that we used, 15 years ago to fix a 2-foot section of pipe to, we have a swing tie to this exact closed corporation stop on your main. Kind of deciding what level of that information is useful and should be preserved is something that will be, figured out over time. But what do we have here? What do we need to maintain? And getting that up to the electronic format is another step, because again, the focus here was really just trying to create the entire system from scratch rather than focusing on the minutia. And that last one is really improving your remote access and your overall functionality. I think the overall end game of this is that you have an iPad with this thing loaded on it. A guy's out there at 2 o'clock in the morning. He needs to look at this exact intersection to see where his valves are. He can just zoom in and find it. An important thing to note is that the 40 scale records are not gone. They all still exist in the digital format as well. You can call them up. If you did that, you could call it up and find it yourself. So again, trying to figure out how your guys on the ground best use it is something to figure out. But that's an iterative process. And, ultimately as they use it, they'll know what's working and what's not. And that's where kind of feedback can be useful. Some other levels of functionality is starting to use this as the basis for a new hydraulic model would probably be worth considering. The city does have a hydraulic model right now that's used to kind of do planning level efforts of, will this development work? Will this business be able to draw, a certain fire flow, things like that. But the model that is existing is fairly old, hasn't been updated in a while. At this point, the connectivity of these mains in the water GIS is probably better than the existing hydraulic model, and with a little bit of extra work could kind of form the basis of a new and improved model that you guys could use. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, you got a pretty robust project with a decent chunk of change through the state and the grant award process. You have excellent records. We don't want you to lose them. We want you to get them over into a format that's maybe a little bit more useful for your guys on the ground, or at least just more functional in this day and age. And moving forward, it's not going to happen overnight. You're probably talking multiple steps, a couple of years of process of sussing out what you need differently, what's working, what's not. But it's an exciting product that eventually it may be extremely useful and very functional for the guys who have to use it all the time. Next slide, please. That's basically it. Nice, short, sweet, to the point. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
We have questions.
How old is the present model that you guys have? I'm just curious.
Sorry, the acoustics in here are
What was that?
How old is the hydraulic model you guys have now?
It's been updated like bits and pieces, but it hasn't been gone through probably in about 10 years, so With this, done, that's probably one of our next steps. So we definitely want to, we're going to be getting tablets for the guys to use in the field. We do have the files scanned and on a computer, but they're just not user-friendly, whereas, with a tablet, it'll have some, GPS capability. So if they're standing at an intersection, when they open the tablet up, they'll be able to go right to there, and there's the plan. So, and then they'll be able to click on there and be able to pull up 40 scale with ties to valves and things like that. So eventually there'll be a transition where we don't need the 40 scale, but it's not quite as easy. And I want to say wastewater was easy because it wasn't, but it's not quite as easy because of we need very precise measurements to certain valves because, there may be 4 valves in a cluster and you want to close the right one. And we definitely don't want to open the one between the high and low systems or something like that. So we need the 40 scale plans, which they'll be able to click on the GIS, and pull up those plans too when they're there. Eventually we'll get the tie sheets there, if they go to a location where there's some water leak and then it comes to find out it's a service line leak and not the main, it's like they're not going to have to run back and look for the service sheet. They're going to be able to click on that property and say, here's the tie sheets for it. We're going to shut down the service file. Maybe it has ties to the corporation or ties to the curb stop. We may be able to shut off those locations. So it'll make things much more efficient because sometimes a lot of times involve running back and forth to get the right plan. This will get everybody, have it in their hand as far as the plans themselves and at those locations and not having to search through, looking for a Spruce Street or Main Street, this plan or whatever. It'll be right there. So I think it'll be, great as far as improving that efficiency. So it's a hard transition because the level of detail, as Sam pointed out on those 40 scale, it's hard to get that into GIS and show the ties. So we still need to maintain that. So we can locate those, the exact valve, not the one that's here, the one that's here. We know which one is what. Because sometimes a paving project or, during the winter months, there's ice or snow over stuff. It's like, we've, mistakenly closed valves or mistakenly opened valves that should have been open between systems. And we just, we still need that level of detail. But I'm real excited about, the steps where we're at and stuff. So we're actually looking at additional grant funding to help move on with maybe getting the tie sheets and everything in there. So we can keep this moving forward. But hopefully we're going to have it, in the next few weeks. They're going to give us the model, basically get it into our system, and then get guys set up with the tablets, and then we'll have it in the next couple months maybe, and be able to use them in the field. So we'll have some training for them. Not all of our guys are computer savvy, so they need a little bit of help with that. But I think once they see how easy it is to use and look up things, I think it'll be a great help to them. So.
I've got a question. Is there any level of this that'll be available to the public on, like on the city's GIS map? I'm in the real estate business, and the top level of this, we don't really need to know what's under the ground, but we need to. It's oftentimes very helpful to know where the water goes.
Yeah.
Is there any level of this incorporated, or is there any intention of incorporating?
I'd like to see that at some point. I mean, is the sewer system available to the public yet, or?
I don't believe it's on the assessor GIS that's publicly
I'd
available.
like to see that moving forward. We're behind like Leominster as far as that. It's
Yeah,
something
Leominster, Lunenburg.
I've been pushing. I personally been pushing, and everybody else too, whatever. But just to move forward in that area, we're a bit behind in that. But
I know you got the information, and it's
it's
frustrating when we want the information to have to call in and try to find it.
it's terrific information, and for.
I get calls all the time.
and it saves because then somebody doesn't have to call us and spend there's an efficiency saver there because that person doesn't waste time. They can look it up and doesn't take up one of our person's time digging that information up and getting it to them, emailing something that's been scanned when they can just look it up online. So I think it's going to save it'll save time on both sides. So
I hope we keep giving consideration to getting that up because a lot of the other towns have it, and it's.
yeah. No, definitely would like to see that done in the near future. So we'll probably should have a meeting in the future, in the near future with, IT and stuff and how we get that integrated, especially now that ours is, as far along as it is, so.
We have some reports on our webpage that have sewer system maps in it, but like a direct link to a map, we don't. But from what John is saying, I think it still would be good for someone to call if they wanted an official answer because things change and if the map's not updated or, a lot of times we have inherent knowledge that might not be displayed on the map. So.
A lot of times it's keeping us out of trouble though because you make assumptions. Yeah. And of course there's sewer here, of course there's sewer at this house, and there's sewer at this house, there's water at this house and water at this house, but it's not connected in the middle, and that's when in our industry we get in trouble.
But at least it would give you a general overview.
Right.
You know, the water system's 5 miles, 4 miles away, obviously there's no water.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely some crazy stuff out there. Like we scratch our heads sometimes. Why weren't these mains connected through?
Yeah, right.
Well, if you look back, they're probably doing it in November of 1957, and they're going to connect it through the next year, and never did, and then it just fell by the wayside. Now we got 2 dead ends, and and it's an expensive project because the road's been repaved, and so. But yeah, then you wonder why is there water here? There's water there, or why is this only 2 inch and this is 8 inch over here? Just some stuff that's a bit odd, but.
I have a quick question just on the tablets. So they'll be able to see the GIS on the tablets?
Yeah, and it's something that we've done in other communities too, but the main functionality, I think what ultimately wins over then usually the guy standing in the field using it is, you can zoom right into any spot. You can zoom literally right into, right outside this door, look at something, tap on this parcel, look at the service card, really get some idea. And especially if you wanted to go back and look at the underlying mapping, there's a limitation right now in trying to look at a scan of a sheet that's, 3 feet by 2 feet. As you zoom in, it gets pretty grainy. So, there's a little bit better use of that as well. So that's, I think, ultimately the main selling point of this is having it in hand and being able to investigate the tiny little details.
Very good. Any other questions?
It's going to be good for planning for us too, because we have Excel spreadsheet of all our water mains and the years they were installed, and whether they're cast or ductile or whatever. This kind of puts it in a format that's much more easy to, you don't have to go in Excel and, organize it to find how many mains were installed from 1950 to 1960, or how much 6-inch before this date or whatever. It's much easier with the GIS database, even just, looking at air release valves. It's like, yeah, we know they're out there and all the plans. Well, now they're all in there. And just by simply doing this, we know there's, I forgot how many.
51.
51, and we got the locations all over the city. It's like, and those are one of the things that, we don't look at all the time. We just assume they're working, but now we have a list of them. Whereas before we would have to pull off the plans. We never had a list before. Now we do, which is kind of nice. Those are some of the side benefits that will help us with managing the water system and planning too down the road, so.
Even just condensing what you have with that sheet, a hydrant book, your 40 scale plans, your tie card database.
Yeah, and as we do work on hydrants and get pressures and flows, we can add those in. And I know some fire departments, not necessarily maybe in the state of Massachusetts, but I've seen some fire departments that have, GPS in their trucks and the GIS on there. And as they pull up to someplace, it's not just that the hydrant's there. This hydrant is capable of 2,200 gallons a minute. This one's only 500 gallons a minute because it's on a 4-inch main that was, needs to be replaced. They will know that pulling up to a fire, that's something that we would like to see down the road. So, it'd make their, their job better, so.
Excellent. Thank you for your report.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you, Sam.
John, you want to continue on?
Sure. Were we gonna do the public forum, or do you want to?
Oh, is there a public forum there? Oh, you want to do that?
Well, it's a continuation of their appeal
All right.
hearing, even though they're not present.
All right, and they're not present, but they've made their presentation. We asked for more information from John, I think, correct?
Yep.
And if we've got that information, hopefully we can make a decision tonight. And
I don't believe Nick Erickson had anything additional beyond what John has.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Nick,
I don't believe that Nick Erickson has anything more beyond what John has produced.
yeah.
so we have all the data for the last few months from that address, and I was looking for anything odd, with the irrigation system going off. It was going off in the middle of the night or ran all day. I didn't see anything like that. I saw that it was being, that was going on. Typically between the hours of 7 to 10, sometimes only a couple hours a day. I also saw it go off at, in the afternoon and maybe in the evening. But most of the time, most of this high usage was due to irrigation between the hours of 7 and 10 in the morning. So, which would you expect for an irrigation system? So I couldn't find, in some ways I was kind of hoping to find something faulty that would go off in the middle of the night, or it just went off for 2 days and never stopped. But it seemed like to be regular usage. I did see that on Memorial Day weekend, there was no usage whatsoever at the house. I assumed that they went away. The irrigation system didn't go off during that time too. I'm not sure what the reason was for that, but it seemed like it may have been manually shut off. I'm not 100% sure, I can't say, but it seemed odd that, the irrigation system wouldn't do that. I did look at some days when it did rain a little bit, looking at past history, and I saw the irrigation system may not have been operating on that day, so I'm not sure if they have a rain sensor or not, so. But I didn't see anything really out of the ordinary as far as the irrigation schedule. It was going off when you expect an irrigation system to go off, for maintaining a lawn. So I didn't see anything faulty with perhaps the controls. That's basically what I saw. I was hoping to find something else, to kind of explain it, but it did just seem like typical usage of an irrigation system.
Typical usage, but programmed incorrectly. If it's going off every day for 3 hours is essentially what you're saying?
Aside from those anomalies, though, that John just noted, I think that their core behavior change of the irrigation system didn't change until they received the bill mid-month June for the month of May. That was really the trigger that changed their behavior.
Yeah, I didn't see any irrigation type usage after that. There was no high, it was definitely ceased at that time, so.
Okay.
So maybe, they didn't realize how much was being used. I mean, it didn't seem like anything unusual with the usage, but, 4 hours of irrigating, 2-3 hours steady it can add up to quite a bit, so.
So I guess, as I see it, as a commission, we've got two choices. One, in the past, we've denied this sort of thing. The request here, well, I shouldn't say we've denied this sort of thing. I don't recall. I've been doing this forever, and I don't recall a specific request on an irrigation system like this. I think we really have two choices here. The request was that we forgive the sewer portion of this, so we can either decide we will forgive the sewer portion of this, or we won't forgive the sewer portion of this. The question is, and I think we all can understand that this water didn't go down into our sewer system. On the other hand, they don't have a separate meter for the sprinkler system, which I think is something we want to continue to encourage, so that we don't have questions and play let's make a deal. So I guess it's up to you as commission. I'll be happy to accept the motion that we.
It's also expressly disallowed by the abatement policy, so if we're going to do this, I don't know if we need to modify the abatement policy.
Okay, and let's make clear. Jeff, you want to? We have a policy, and can you tell us what the policy says?
The only abatable outside use of water is swimming pool fills.
Yeah.
Before we made the change in, I think it was 2016 when we made the change, we did have an allowance for irrigation and the watering of new lawns. It became cumbersome to monitor and manage that system because you couldn't really tell how much water they were using for that purpose and what their real usage was for billing purposes. So that was the real driver behind eliminating that. So it only left swimming pools as the only outside use of water that's abatable. So if someone's washing their car, they're paying water and sewer charges. If they're power washing the deck, power washing the siding, it's water and sewer charges.
And with swimming pools, it's easy to calculate, you have a 24-foot round pool, 4 feet, being filled 4 feet. It's easy enough to know that, this much needs to be deducted from the sewer charge. But, in this instance here, it's like, a lot of people water their gardens and lawns and still pay the sewer charge, knowing that it's not quite worthwhile to have an irrigation meter, depending on what that is. So I think that's kind of, you hate to open a can of worms by permitting when other people, might be in a similar situation, but that's just something to think about.
Okay, but from the staff's recommendation that we have a policy and there's nothing unusual that we've been able to find that is the fault of our system. Is that what I'm hearing, your recommendations?
Based on my review with the information that was provided to me, there was nothing that demonstrated the system was faulty. had there been something that demonstrated there was a faulty controller, if a repair was made to correct the controller or to repair the controller, that would have been a different can of worms as far as I was concerned, and I would have considered that for an abatement. But there was nothing here that demonstrated that that was the case, so from my perspective, it was an operator error.
What's the requested amount?
How much was the sewer charge? It's like $500-something.
I don't have that. Oh, actually, I have with me the May bill, and the sewer charge for the May bill was 48 units, so that sewer charge was $437.28.
437?
437.28, and of course, they didn't make this behavior change until midway through the month of June, so the bill they received in July was also affected. And I don't have that statement with me, I don't believe.
You know, it's kind of interesting. I got to, personally feel the pain of the sewer charge. I was having my eaves, my home painted, and the painters came and pressure washed everything, and my bill doubled just for that one project. So it adds up quick, and unfortunately, I think people don't realize that.
And without an irrigation main, it's very difficult. It would create a huge burden on the staff if we had to start, trying to figure out, say, how much you will use to do your house. Well, I use twice as much, so the other half is that. It's not that I want to see people pay more money necessary, but, it's, if there's an accident or something like that, I can understand it, but at the same time, it's like, it's pretty clear cut,
Sure.
and it's made to ensure that everybody pays their fair share, but also not to have, a gray area. It's like, well, we got to figure it out for this person, figure out, next thing you know, we'll have all kinds of requests, and that's a bit concerning to me if that happens. So,
In the interest of moving this along, I think it'd be easier if we can discuss a motion. I'd like to accept a motion.
Which has to be in the affirmative, so.
Does it have to be in the affirmative?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So I'll make the motion to approve relief for $437.28.
I'd like to point out that they were flushing toilets and taking showers, so we can't abate that entire amount. What I would do is a review of past summers when their irrigation system would have operated, and then did a differential between this period and what they would typically use in irrigation months. And that would be my basis for a relief, if that's acceptable to the commission.
Mike, I just want to make sure I get your intent, because I'm not, I can't think of Robert's rules saying that a motion has to be, that we've had a request made to us.
Right.
And does our motion have to be that we'll approve it, or can we make a motion that would deny, if that's your intent? Is your intent to support, is your intent to support a forgiveness?
I think all motions have to be made in the affirmative to approve it, okay? To approve the request. It's, and again, I'm kind of going off my experience from the ZBA, where if it's a request to overrule the building commissioner, for example, or for an approval for a variance or a special permit, that's always made in the affirmative, and if the board, as a voter, you can vote to approve it or deny it.
Okay.
My only point is to abate the entirety of the sewer bill would not be legitimate, because they were using water aside from this
Okay,
irrigation.
I thought that kind of was factored in, so I do apologize. So I guess I would try to put some language here to make a motion to accommodate a credit for the wastewater costs as requested at 68 Bellotta Way for the month of, do we know what that is? For the month requested?
Based on the new meters and the ability to see when the irrigation was taking place, we have a good handle on that.
yeah,
It's essentially
we can quantify that.
Okay.
time-wise.
For the time requested, right? I guess it's a pretty simple motion.
Okay, do I have a second to that motion? Excuse me, discussion on the motion. Did you want to-
No, I mean, I think we have rules and regulations. It is unfortunate that it's an increased cost to the, let's call it the applicant before us, but, you know, I've witnessed firsthand again recently how those costs increase just on a short-term use of the additional water. So I can see where it would definitely, you know, could rise to that cost, having an irrigation system, you know.
So you're speaking against the motion?
That's correct.
Any other? Anybody else? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a vote. All those in favor of the motion, which is to abate the water usage, all those in favor? All those opposed?
Aye.
The motion fails. Thank you.
So we're denying the motion that she's asking for, basically.
Yeah. Okay, John.
I wasn't sure where you're going, now I understand where you,
Yeah, okay, sorry. It was kind of an awkward,
because I was kind of against it too, but I'm like, now I see where you're going with it, okay.
We should still memorialize this with a correspondence to the applicant.
yes, please.
So I can author that, and just to say it in layman's terms, we're denying her appeal of my decision.
Yes, we're denying the appeal based on the policy of the commission, I guess, yeah. The written policies of the commission, yeah, so it's,
Which is very clear.
yeah, because it is clear. Okay.
Would you like me to email that to you, Rick, so that you can print it out and sign it, or do you want me to sign on your behalf?
You can, either way. I'm happy to sign it if you want me to.
You're the boss, whichever way you want it, I'll do it.
Yeah, send it to me and I'll
Okay.
sign it, sure.
He has this.
Okay, John, what's next?
We're going to skip over the next line on River Street until Nick Erickson can be here for the next meeting, so.
Okay.
I just have a couple other items, the Falula water treatment plant. So we have two treatment plants, the regional plant, which is a 12 MGD, 12 million gallon a day plant, and then the Falula plant, which is where our offices are on Ridge Road. That's a 6 million gallon a day plant. We've actually had it shut down for about a month or so now. We had some issues with, after one of the last real heavy rain events, with high color in the water and also high turbidity, and the plant just wouldn't run efficiently on that. Because the city doesn't use a lot of water, we're actually can supply the whole city very easy through the regional plant. At the Falula plant, we were only running about 1.2 or so million gallons a day, even though it had a capability of 6 million gallons a day. The regional plant's running around about 4.5 million gallons a day, supplying the whole city, and that's a 12 MGD plant. We decided to, there was another reason for that, is that we were, because we weren't turning over the water in our storage tanks, we were seeing chlorine residuals start to drop down, so we had to increase chlorine residuals, and that'll lead into the next item. But by running solely off the regional plant, we're actually able to get better turnover in the tanks, and by fluctuating the tanks some more. Basically, we're putting a little bit of water from both plants into the tanks, and things just weren't turning over, which isn't good because the water gets older. And our chlorine residual goes down. So we've actually had a higher dose of chlorine this year going into the system. It's well below any limits or whatever, but we try to keep the chlorine as low as possible while still remaining a residual at the far ends of the system. So we're about up to like 1.7 parts per million chlorine. The legal limit's 4 parts per million. We never even come close to that, but 1.7. Typically in the summer months, we're at like 1.5, going from like 1.3, 1.35 up to 1.5, or a little more. So we did have to go up a little bit more this year, because of the no turnover in the tanks. But other water systems also experience, with all the heavy rain that we've had this year, and the warm temperatures, just create a lot of organics in the reservoirs. Our total organic carbon is up in our reservoirs. Level, which feeds the Falula plants, around 5 milligrams per liter. Over at regional, it's typically 2 or under. We're seeing it closer to 3. It doesn't sound like much of a difference, but it makes the treatment system we have, doesn't work the greatest for that. If we still filter everything, but we still have some something that gets through. It doesn't, health-wise, we have no bacteria or anything like that, but it just makes things less efficient with those systems. So we've been just running off the regional plant. We've communicated that to DEP, and they understand. And everything seems to be, better as far as turnover in the tanks and things like that. So, but just wanted to let you know that. We've had problems with Falula before, that plant up there, just because reservoir just for some reason has high color and high total organic carbon in it, particularly in the last few years. And it may be something due to climate change. We're not sure. The other water systems have seen some of the same things. I'm not sure if they've seen the same thing in Leominster, but
No town, we get it all the time.
yeah, I had heard that DEP said, you're not alone. And so, something that may affect us down the road. I'm hoping next year isn't, quite so bad as far as rain events. I mean, July was terrible, and that, no water use combined with, all the organics that are in the water and stuff really, made the plants run inefficiently. So I just wanted to update that. And like I said, we're communicating with DEP. DEP's been out. I mean, we talk with them all the time, let them know what's going on, so they're comfortable with everything. So having said all that, we did, and I know that some was on some of the Facebook pages for the city about odor and taste issues with the water. And we looked into it. We thought it might be, maybe some algae blooms and stuff. We couldn't find any evidence of a major issue like that, which, we would have, tried to deal with. But we believe that with the higher chlorine and the higher total organic carbon, we're seeing is that most of these taste and odor conditions are at dead ends. Sometimes that just happens with that type of treatment of the water with the higher organic carbon. So we're hoping that that those goes down. It didn't mean anything was unsafe with the water whatsoever. Bacteria, we never had any hits or anything like that, and no issues like that. Nothing unusual with the plants as far as using additional chemicals besides the higher chlorine dosage in our filter runs and our clarifier runs before they were backwashed. There was nothing unusual with that either. So everything checked out fine. DEP was actually out to look at our reservoirs and everything else. Just, like I said, we talk to them all the time. They have some extra experts. They kind of help us because another water system maybe experience the same issues as them. We don't know that, but they would because they're talking to all these water systems. So, but I just wanted to let you know that, it's something we are, we're not ignoring. We've been trying to figure out, and we're hoping that, with a cooler weather, with the water cooling down, and with us able to reduce our chlorine dosage, we'll see a decrease in that. We have done some flushing in some areas, and that's helped a bit, but it still has, some, it still had some issues here and there. So it seems like the complaints have tapered off. I mean, if anybody does have any complaints, they should call us so we can kind of look at it. We're not going to, ignore it. We want to try to figure it out, but that's the best that we can figure out at this time. And DEP too, with their experts that came out, that it's likely due to the higher total organic carbon with the higher chlorine dosage that we needed to use with the water warmer temperatures and so forth. So I don't know if anybody had any issues. I'm not sure if anybody else in Fitchburg, any of the board members had any issues with it. Yeah, it was spotty here and there, and then it just seemed to be, more pervasive in the dead ends, and despite our flushing, and it just must be the level of chlorine at those locations met a point where you actually got that odor or musty or earthy smell. We don't have any type of a finishing step in our treatment, like a granular activated carbon that would remove all that. I mean, we never had to because our water's always been very good from the reservoirs. And like I said, it's not, anything that's a health issue. It's not, great to have water that smells that way. And we've tried to do our best with that. So, but if anybody, like I said, I don't think this meeting's being televised, but if anybody does have any issues, to tell them to contact us, because unless we are told about it, we don't know. So, and it may require us to do some more flushing in those areas. But like I said, hopefully with the change of season and the water temperature dropping, us being able to lower our chlorine dosage, that those issues will go away. So, and that's pretty much what I have. I don't know if any questions on any of that, or. And with Falula Dam, we actually run more efficiently. The treatment plants don't like to run at, 15% capacity. They'd rather run in the middle, 30, 40, 50% capacity. They don't want to run at 100%. That's not, but the plants actually run that way. We have a lot of difficulty, with the plants running the way they do. So it's not anything that's detrimental as far as just running from one plant. We're actually more efficient that way as far as, our use of electricity, chemicals, and things like that. So it's a benefit in that respect. At some point, we'll put Falula back on because we like to, use that. We're typically running water through it each day. It just goes to waste just to keep things turned over. But I anticipate in the next couple of weeks, we'll put that back on. The color has come down, but not, not to where we'd like to see it, but it's manageable at this point, so. All right.
Jeff, what do you got?
First item on the wastewater agenda is a follow-up on the ordinance change that we had promulgated back in late 2020. Westminster quickly came out of the gate and provided us an updated ordinance to comply with our Fitchburg sewer ordinance change. I performed a review of that document, got them feedback, and then Westminster voted it into in the spring of 2021. Lunenburg was straggling a little bit behind. They were putting a lot of effort into reviewing the document and affecting the appropriate changes for their sewer use ordinance. So they had provided us their updated ordinance in approximately mid-June. It was June 16th when I received it, and I wasn't able to carve out the time to do a formal review of it. But I had provided that feedback to Lunenburg on September 28th, and I gave them back 6 pages of comments. So I would expect that they would take that feedback and incorporate it into changes that can be voted on and approved by the Lunenburg Sewer Commission. These are sewer rules and regs, so it's not bylaw for the town of Lunenburg. They would have the Sewer Commission approve that. Any questions on that item? That's just pretty much a status update.
Okay, that's good. Thanks, Jeff.
Second item, this was a little bit more involved, and I had started to provide an introduction to this. This is the petition that was submitted by City Council, petition 134-21, that was seeking for the city to do a review as to whether or not we can take over the hauling of wastewater biosolids. Right now, for the entirety of my term as deputy commissioner, and before then, we've had a contracted service to perform that. So there's a line item in the budget for sludge and solids removal, and there's 2 things that we actually pay out of that. One is the hauling service, and one is the actual charges that Waste Management charges. We do have an agreement with Waste Management or /RCI, where we're taking their leachate from the landfill and we're sending to them our biosolids from the East Plant. So there's a methodology of how we get charged for that. But in fiscal 21, it was just under $60,000, I believe, that we were charged from Waste Management, and the balance of costs were associated with our hauling service. So in the memorandum that I provided to the commission members, I have a 3-page review. The first page and a half is essentially background, explaining exactly what the charge is. Key considerations here is, according to the health department, we're anticipating only effectively 2.5 years of life on that landfill, where they're expecting to cease accepting hauled wastes in July of 2024. So that's the beginning of fiscal 25. So if we were to take this on, we'd be taking it on effectively for fiscal years 23 and 24 before we would have to effect a change and haul these materials ourselves to who knows where, some other distance, probably a much higher tipping fee to dispose of it at the end disposition location. So on the second page, I present some cost reviews. Because this is really critical to the wastewater operation, we can't have days when, we can't process sludge today because, Joe truck driver is home with the sniffles or his daughter has a dance recital. We need continuity of service for this. So that means we would need to have a primary vehicle and probably a secondary vehicle just so that we have a fallback in case there was some kind of mechanical issue or, several tires blow out or something like that. We would also have to hire someone to do this driving. Right now, we're hauling about 3 loads per day when we're producing solids. So that's a relatively short distance. I think it's an 8-mile trip from the east plant one way to the Fitchburg Westminster landfill. So it's round trips and 3 trips per day. But we would also have to purchase 4 roll-off containers. The roll-off containers that we're currently using are through the contract service. So when I looked at the 2 years of operation based on it being very front-loaded on capital costs for the trucks and the bins and so forth, ultimately I was projecting that it would probably be almost $550,000 for 2 years. When I compared that against the hauling service contract, that's roughly $600,000. So there's a marginal cost savings, but we would be taking on all that liability and responsibility for reliable service, where currently we have that deferred onto a service provider.
Just a quick question.
Sure, Mike.
The $59,773, do we have to pay that as well if we were to go do it in-house? Is that an add-on?
That's Waste Management managing the contract that we have between the city and Waste Management. They're the contract ops, of course, for the landfill.
Okay, so it costs us $60,000 to dump our sludge at our dump.
Right, we have like a free ticket up until we get to a certain threshold, and then when we cross that threshold, they start invoicing us for hauled sludge.
Okay, thank you.
So, cutting to the chase, in the summary and recommendation, due to the uncertainties of the landfill and the fact that we may have to ramp this up into a fleet of trucks and a fleet of drivers and potentially bring on a full-time diesel mechanic to maintain this fleet of vehicles, my recommendation is to not pursue this and to try to work with the procurement office to see if we can get more competitive bidding for better pricing of contracted hauling service.
Is this something that requires a motion, or is this just a report, and this is a report that you'll be delivering to the
The
city
council referred this to the Water and Wastewater Commission, so they would expect to receive a recommendation from the commission on the petition.
Okay, so what we're looking for is a motion. Does anybody have questions for Jeff to begin with?
I think it's a
So
good idea.
Yeah, so in the event that, does anybody, I guess maybe the question is, does anybody disagree with Jeff's recommendation? So then, I think I'm looking for a motion to recommend to the city council that we continue the current, what do we want to call this, outside, continue to have the landfill, the hauling costs continue to be a
Contracted service.
contracted service. Thank you, Jeff.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second to that?
I'll second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
All right.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Third bullet under wastewater agenda. It's a little bit of an update on the ongoing CSS project. We had a meeting in September, which was the first one we had in a while. We had made a safety decision that we would close Water Street to complete the Water Street work because it was very disruptive, it was very complicated. It would have been unsafe to try to allow vehicles to cut through, and we would have been backfilling and re-excavating, day in, day out. It would have drawn out the process. So the work went a little bit longer than we had hoped. We had hoped that it would conclude at the end of August, and I believe it was September 23rd when we issued out a press release indicating that we were reopening Water Street. So we were very relieved to reopen that main artery into and out of the downtown. The contractor is progressing to other work zones within the project area. They have one crew on Nashua Street, which is presently between Washington Street and Worcester Street. I believe it's approaching Washington. They have a second construction crew over on Clarendon Street, which is currently in the intersection with Legros Street. So it's progressing towards Franklin Street. So they're moving along in two different areas. I think that this contractor has done quite well, and I don't think we've had a lot of difficulties with this contractor as compared to others. I think they've worked well with water as well. They've worked well with the Unitil. Overall, I think the project is moving quite well. We're looking to do the closure or the permanent closure work for the CSO regulator 048, which is in front of Market Basket and Water Street. Effectively, I think we have most of the changes affected for CSO 039, which is Water Street at Walnut Street, and that was really the most active regulator associated with this separation job. So we're moving along, and I think that we're on schedule overall and on budget. Do the commission members have any specifics? I did hand out also a schedule update that's a 4-week look ahead, I believe,
Yep.
to show you where the contractor is going.
Any questions?
Aside from that, you've probably also noticed that we've got quite a bit of activity out in Main Street and the greater Main Street area. This is us getting ready for our next separation job. Because of the consent decree, we have to have overlapping efforts where we're doing the investigations and planning and design work while the last project is still being constructed. The overall deadline for the consent decree for the separation work is December 31st of 2030. And that sounds like it's a long way away, but when you're dealing with these very large capital projects, they're very time consuming. So we're getting into the beginning phases to get ready for this next job. We had, you probably noticed, we had issued out, and Tony was the primary author of that, sewer system manager, Tony Maressa, who's with me. We had issued out a press release associated with our smoke testing, and smoke testing is one of those sewer system evaluation survey activities that we use to identify the scope of what we need to do within a separation area. So that work is actually anticipated to be completed by October 22nd, and that's weather pending. If we were to get a bunch of rain, it would be interfering with the conducting of that work. So that schedule may slide a little bit depending on the weather. Any questions? With that, I just have my last bullet, and that was to notify the commission that I have tendered a resignation. It's been a pleasure working for the city and working with this commission. But I think the city will be in good hands. I think we have a good roadmap going forward on what we're doing with wastewater. Overall, I think the enterprise is in fairly good condition. So I feel pretty good about leaving behind a wastewater enterprise that's in pretty good shape.
Well, Jeff, I think we're going to miss you. I've enjoyed working with you for, boy, as long as you've been here. And I appreciate the education that you've given me and you've given the commission. And I think I speak for all of us when we wish you good luck in your new endeavor.
Thank you. One thing I would mention is that the city is, when I say the city, I mean DPW and wastewater, is communicating and collaborating with the mayor's office and with the HR office for a succession plan to backfill my vacancy.
You know, I'd just like to say this. some people give varying efforts in what they do in life, but you haven't given 100% and you haven't given 110%, you've given 120. And as a resident, I greatly appreciate what you've done for the city and carrying the ball on these projects. They're immense, and every time I see what you have on your plate and what the city's had to, wrap their arms around with this whole separation project, I'd like to say thank you, and definitely wish you the best, and you're going to be deeply missed. So.
I appreciate your kind words.
Thank you. Any other business? So the next meeting will be November 10th, here at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And if we have no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
We are,
Jen.
we are adjourned. Look at that on the
Good
big
night.
screen up there.